Hi, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be looking at the sine rule and specifically how we use the sine rule to find both a missing side and a missing angle. Now this topic is specifically for higher students, so if you are sitting the foundation paper, this is not the topic that you need to cover, so maybe choose one of the topics that you have been guided towards by your class teacher. So the sine rule, let's just recap what the sine rule is. So we use the sine rule in what are called non-right angled triangles to find either a missing side or a missing angle. So what I mean by non-right angled triangles is I basically just mean any triangle that doesn't contain a right angle. Now you can use it in right angled triangles, but actually in right angled triangles we should be using SOHCAHTOA. Now there's two versions of the sine rule depending on whether we're finding a missing side or whether or not we're finding a missing angle. So suppose we've got any triangle here. So I've labelled my three angles, I've labelled them A, B and C. I've just used capital letters to denote the fact that they are my angles, and then my sides, I've called those A, B and C in lowercase to show that they are the sides. Now importantly, notice where side A is in relation to angle A. So side A is opposite angle A, side B is opposite angle B, and side C is opposite angle C. So to find a missing side, we use A over side A equals B over side B. And all that means is if we divide length A by the sine of angle A, we'll get exactly the same answer as if we divide length B by sine of angle B. So that's what the sine rule basically says. Now don't get too hung up on in exam about which angle we're going to call A, B and C. The important thing is that within this equation we're using side A and angle A, side B and angle B. The important thing is to remember these come in pairs. So angle A goes with side A and they are opposite. Angle B goes with side B and again they are opposite. Now if we're finding a missing angle, we just flip that, we just turn that whole formula on its head and say that sine A over A equals sine B over B. So two versions of the sine rule depending on whether we're finding a missing angle or a missing side. If we're finding a missing side, put the sides on top, so lowercase a and lowercase b. If we're finding an angle, then we put the angles on top. Right, let's look at an example then. So in this first case, we are going to use the sine rule to find a missing side. So I'm just going to start by writing down the sine rule. So within this question here, I've got two angles and I've got a side. And importantly, the side that I'm given to this 17 is opposite the 65. And the length I'm trying to find is opposite the angle. So we know we can use the sine rule because everything's in its pairs. The 65 goes with the 17 and the x goes with the 42. If I wasn't given specifically that information, I wouldn't be using the sine rule. So the sine rule tells me that if I divide 17 by sine of 65, then I get the same answer as if I divide x by sine of 42. So to work out what x is, I'm going to divide 17 by sine of 65, and then I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by sine of 42. So all we need to do now is put that into a calculator, use the fraction button, type it in exactly as you see it there, being really careful not to mistype something, and that will give me 12.55. So the length of x is 12.55. Looks about right, so it's opposite a smaller angle. So a bigger side will always be opposite a bigger angle. A smaller side will be opposite a smaller angle. Right, 2 questions for you to have a go at. So pause the video and have a go at those questions. Okay, hopefully then you've had a go at those questions. So the important thing is not just being able to answer the question, but also knowing why we are using the sine rule. So we're using the sine rule here because we've got an opposite pair. The 17 is paired with the 85. X is paired with 72. So the sine rule says that 17 over sine 85 is equal to x over sine 72. So that means that x is equal to sine 17 divided by sine 85 multiplied by sine 72. So again, put that into your calculator, use the fraction button, and that gives me 16.23. Second question, this time look at where your pairs are. So the 4 is opposite the 35, the x is opposite the 72. So 4 over sine 35 is equal to x over sine 72. So that means that x is 4 divided by sine 35 times by sine of 72. So again, put that into your calculator. Really important in the exam that you don't cut corners, that you write that level of working out down. And that will give me 6.63. And again, that looks about right. My answer's got to be bigger than 4 because the length that we were looking for was opposite a bigger angle. So a bigger side will be opposite a bigger angle. Right, this time then, we're going to use the sine rule to find the size of a missing angle. So remember what I said about the beginning of the video. When we're finding a missing angle, I just flip the sine rule on its head and I say that sine A over A is equal to sine B over B. So because I'm finding my angles, I've put my angles on the top. Now we can use the other version of the sine rule. It just makes it more complicated to rearrange when the angles are on the bottom. So again, let's look where my angles are in relation to the sides. So the 9 is opposite the angle I want. So they're a pair. The 13 is opposite the 84. So sine of 84 divided by 13 is equal to sine of A divided by 9. Now I'm trying to work out what A is. So I'm going to find sine of A by dividing sine of 84 by 13 and then multiplying that by 9. So what I'm doing here is I'm multiplying both sides of my equation by 9. So again, put that into your calculator. Now that gives me 0.6885, and the reason for that is because at this point we've worked out sine of A. So as we know, when we're finding an angle, I always need to use the inverse sine or the inverse cosine or the inverse tan, depending on which function we're using. Here we're using sine, so I do the inverse sine of my answer, and that will give me 43.5. 5 degrees. Again, looks about right because we knew it's going to be smaller than 84 because 9 is smaller than 13. So a smaller side is opposite a smaller angle. Okay, 2 questions for you to have a go at then. So pause the video now and have a go at those 2 questions. Okay, so question 1, we're finding the sides of angle A. So remember to pair these up. 7 goes with the A, 11 goes with the 85. So in terms of my formula, that means the sine of 85 divided by 11 equals sine of A over 7. So to find sine of angle A, I do sine of 85 divided by 11 and then times that by 7. Now remember that will give me sine of A, so I need to then divide that. I need to inverse sine of that. So the inverse sine of my answer, which is 39.3. Question 2 then, so again, pair these up. The angle I want goes with the 9, so that means sine 35 over 6 is equal to sine of A over 9. So to work out sine of A, I do sine 35 divided by 6, times that by 9, and then again, because I'm finding an angle, I do the inverse sine, and we should get 59.4. It's 59.35, so that rounds to 59.4. Hopefully you got those 2 answers. If you didn't, just maybe pause the video, have another go at those questions, or rewind and have another look at the example. Finally then, let's finish with an exam question. So the question says, here is a triangle ABC. Work out the length of A to B. So A to B is this length down here. Give your answer to 1 decimal place. So notice in the question, it doesn't say anything about using the sine rule. The examiner is expecting you to realise that you need to be using the sine rule in this question. Now, how we know we're using the sine rule, remember, is that sine rule is when we've got an opposite pair. So if I'm finding the length of x, I need to know the angle opposite x, which I do. And I've got 23.8. Now notice I don't know the angle opposite the 23.8. Now I need to know that angle before I go any further, because remember the sine rule works off opposites. Now I can easily work out this third angle using angles in a triangle. So your first step is to work out that missing angle and then use that to find the sine rule. Now I said right at the beginning of the video not to get too hung up on which is A, which is B and which is C. For some people, they prefer to completely ignore these because in some ways it overcomplicates it. The important thing is to remember to pair up the angle with the side opposite. So pause the video and have a go at this question. Okay, so in this question we are finding the length of AB, so we're finding a side. So I'm going to use the sine rule where my sides are on the top. A over sine A equals B over sine B. Really important we write that down in the exam. So where are my pair that I've got? So I said earlier I needed to work out this third angle. So hopefully that was the first step. So 180, take away 34, take away 26. So this missing angle here was 120. Now I need that because that 120 is paired with the 23.8. So 23.8 divided by sine of 120 is equal to the length I'm trying to find divided by sine of 34. Really important we use the 34 because that is the one opposite the length. So I'm not using the 26 within the sine rule, I just use the 26 to find this missing angle. So x is equal to 23.8 divided by sine of 120 and multiply that by 34. Again, important we don't cut corners. Write all that working out down. Important for you, it's important for the examiner. And then just make sure we don't mistype anything. So my answer 15.367. So the question asks to one decimal place, so 15.4 centimeters. Okay, so there we have it. Your answer 15.4 centimeters. Quick look at the mark scheme then. So you can see we've got that right, 15.4. So where are the marks coming from? So it's a 3-mark question. The first mark, the examiner can see you've made an attempt to use the sine rule. We've had to work out this missing angle. Now notice here, 120, that's in speech marks to show that if you work that angle out incorrectly for some reason, if you've done a miscalculation, you've got the wrong answer to that angle, you're still going to get credit for that. The second mark, for attempting to work out A to B by doing this calculation again. And again, still notice that 120 is in speech marks. So if we worked out that 120 wrong at the beginning of the question, we worked out that third missing angle, we're still getting the majority of the credit. And then the final mark for an answer between 15.36 and 15.4. Okay, well done. Hopefully that's clarified and given you a bit of practice with the sine rule. Maybe you can come back and watch this video again at any point.